Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid. How are you? Yes. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, we'd like to welcome you all to the first episode of the Qazwini Brothers podcast. My name is Sayyid Muhammad Reza Qazwini, and joined with me today is my elder brother, the knowledgeable Sayyid JawadQazwini. Today we'll be discussing a very important topic that pertains to over 2 billion people around the world. We're talking about voting today. When it comes to voting, Muslims have mixed opinions. Sayyid, today I'm going to be going over 6 topics with you. Number 1, we'll be talking about the Muslim migration to the United States. Number 2, we'll be talking about Muslim political achievements within the United States and the current structure of the American politics system. Number 3, we're going to be talking about the importance of civil engagement. Number 4, we'll be talking about how to bring awareness to civil engagement in our community centers. Number 5, we'll be talking about donating to Muslim elected officials. And number 6, we'll be talking about the American dream. So let's start off with the first topic, Sayyid, the Muslim migration to the United States.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, the Gracious, the Most Merciful. And before we engage in this very important topic, I would like to congratulate everybody on the arrival of the blessed month of Ramadan. For many, this is the first day of the month of Ramadan, and for others it is tomorrow. Inshallah, this will be a beautiful, spiritual, blessed month for all of us. A month that's going to change the situation of the Muslims around the world, inshallah, to better. And let's get started with the topic, inshallah.
Inshallah.
The topic that we have chosen is political involvement, voting, and especially because we're getting close to the 2020 elections here in the United States.
Right.
And I thought that it is something very important for us to discuss and shed some light upon. I know that there's a lot of talk shows and podcasts happening in Ramadan by different scholars and by different activists in our community. However, many of them are obviously discussing purely religious topics, right?
Right.
And I think that the topics that we came up with are as important for Muslims living in the West as, for example, discussing very religious topics, because this pertains their future, this pertains their present, and this also pertains the past. Since we're starting with the very first point, which is
The Muslim migration.
the Muslim migration to the United States, I would like to say this, that obviously Muslims came to the United States with the very first settlers to the United States. And
Right.
some of them were, the very first people to actually arrive to this country. However, I'm not really going to discuss that far away. I want to discuss the past 40 to 60 years where Muslims left their countries from the Middle East and came to the United States. And let us ask why they did that.
Right.
Did they come because they were completely comfortable and satisfied in their countries, but they decided they want to explore somewhere new? Did they enjoy religious freedom in their countries? Were they able to live in democracies? The answer is no. They came to the United States because a lot of them wanted to live a better life. A life that consists of freedom, democracy, where their voices are heard, where they're not being harassed, where they're not being imprisoned for who they are and what they believe in. And for the past 40 to 60 years since the Muslims have arrived here, I feel that they have been engaged in putting their kids to school, sending them to universities, starting their own businesses, paying their own bills, just settling in. And I feel that it's time that this transition takes place where they realize they're not going back home. This is where they're going to live. This is where they're going to die. This is where they're going to be buried. This is where their children are getting married. Their grandchildren will live. And this is where the future is. So remember why you came. You came because you wanted your voice to be heard. You came because you wanted to be involved. You came because back home they didn't care about your opinion. Now that you're here, you have to seize this opportunity.
Right.
Because in some ways, the same things can happen here, When there's a law that's being passed banning Muslims from, for example, immigrating to this country, we really didn't have a voice. We couldn't stop that. When other things pertaining Islam or the Muslim community, whether it's living in the West or Muslims globally, we really are not able to get our voice heard, and that is because we have not gone involved. So I think the very first point is important, that we should remind ourselves and our community of why we immigrated to this country, and to make sure that we're not going to end up feeling the same way that we felt back home 50 years, 20 years, 5 years from now in this country or anywhere in the West.
Right. So just to give our viewers some insight into how much our voice matters, a Pew Research poll was conducted in 2017, and it found that there's over 3.5 million Muslims living in the United States. So that's a little over 1% of the U.S. population. But just to put it into perspective, there's only 3 Muslim elected officials in Congress. So what do you think it is we could do to change that? How can we make our voice heard and get more Muslim elected officials?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that it's the mindset. It's the way we think. For the longest time, in our communities, we have just been giving, information to people. And mostly our centers have served as cultural, religious bases for the community to basically feel what they felt when they were back home, when they went to a mosque or a community center. And we have not really taught them how to think. We have not, even when it comes to religious matters, when it comes to the Quran, when it comes to the hadith, when it comes to the Islamic sciences. We really didn't teach people how to think, but we just gave them a lot of information. And all this information, sometimes it resonates with people, and sometimes soon enough, they'll forget everything as soon as they walk away from that lecture or that gathering. Similarly, it's about our lifestyle in the West. We need to have seminars, we need to have speakers, we need to be motivated to learn how to integrate in this society and how to become successful. Yes, many Muslims are an extremely successful minority in America. There's a lot of doctors, physicians, attorneys, professors, a lot of successful individuals. However, they have achieved that by themselves. It's not like, in their local centers or their local mosque, somebody really guided them through this process and there was a plan. So I think the first thing that we ought to do is we ought to change the way people think. Individual win and individual success is always going to remain as an individual, singular success. Right. And we need to change our community to think as a team. How are we going to win all together? And that's what's going to bring change. I may be somebody that, can go through a VIP lane or a business class, sort of traveling through airports, or you, but I can't. Therefore, nothing is going to change for our community, where every time they end up at an airport, they're going to be randomly selected. So if you have a privilege,
Right.
think of your cousin, think of your wife, think of your son, think of your daughter. They're not going to have the ability to travel the same way. Even if your immediate family does, your relatives won't be able to. So we have to think of how we're going to change that for everybody. And regardless, even we're discussing this and it pertains to the Muslim community, but I think injustice, I think discrimination against anybody is something that we should seek to change. I also think that we have to have seminars in our communities, centers, or our mosques where experts come and tell us about our rights. Experts come and tell us about how we should get involved politically. Talk about the structure of, for example, the city council, the mayor's office,
Right.
Local elections, nationwide elections, presidential elections, how all those can really have an impact on our lives.
Right. Yeah, 2018, the year of 2018 was a really good stepping stone for Muslims in terms of achievements. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar were the first two Muslim women elected into Congress. And one of them happens to wear a hijab as well. So that is proof, that's living proof that if we do our job, we can make our voice heard and we can reach the White House and Capitol Hill. So thank you for those points.
Just to elaborate on
Right.
this point, I think a lot of us, we don't know how involved Muslims are already in the political system in America.
Right.
I mean, we have started this process, and I remember a couple of years ago when I went to do the Friday prayers on Capitol Hill. I was invited by the Muslim members of Congress to lead the Friday prayers on Capitol Hill.
Right.
And you would be surprised, there is a huge room that fits about 600 people on Capitol Hill, and it gets full. It gets full by people who are working there as staffers, as individuals who are working with members of Congress, or the surrounding area of the members of Congress, and end up coming there for the Friday prayers. And I also want to say this, that the members of Congress, the members of the Muslim members of Congress who are in Congress today, or for example like Keith Ellison when he's no longer in the Congress.
Right.
This was a very, very difficult journey for them. This was not easy, believe me.
Definitely.
Being an African American is already something that is very difficult.
Right.
And then being a Muslim makes it much more difficult. Being an immigrant, for Rashida Tlaib, for example, or Ilhan Omar, it makes things very hard, especially when she's also wearing the hijab.
Right.
I can imagine how difficult her days and nights were before she got into Congress, and I think her difficulty probably started as soon as she even arrived to the Congress. But look, those people, they're brave. They did their part, and I'm sure they have motivated many people. I'm sure they have inspired many people to take the same path. And one thing I forgot to mention when we were discussing the change in paradigm and how we should change the way we think, I think we should encourage our youth to think of a political future, a political career, to get involved, to volunteer, for example, when they can.
Right.
On Capitol Hill. And those opportunities are always there for minority groups to get involved, to go and work on Capitol Hill. And I must say we have to seize those opportunities.
Yeah. When you bring that up, I've heard a lot of people that have a negative view on voting and civic engagement, especially youth my age. I hear in our community centers, They tend to have the mindset of, why should I get out and vote when my voice won't even matter? My vote won't even matter. Trump will get elected no matter what, so why should I get out and vote? So, for those that don't know, first of all, civic engagement is the activity of a community to address their public concerns to bring change to their community on a political scale. So when we talk about civic engagement, what is the importance of civic engagement and getting involved in our local communities and not only on a presidential level?
I truly believe that everybody ends up seeing the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
The iceberg is a huge mass of ice that is underwater, and everybody just sees the tip of that iceberg.
Right.
And people who try to achieve something very big, like, oh, let's stop this presidential candidate from getting into office, or let's get this one into office. Yeah, that's obvious. We have to try for that. We have to get out there. We have to vote. We have to be involved. However, that's just like holding the iceberg, getting a little iceberg, holding it, with your hands up so that the tip of the iceberg would show on top of the water.
Right.
There is no foundations. We have to work. We have to do grassroots work. We have to make real change. And real change starts with a very, very local, on a very local level. In your local school system, getting involved in your local elections, go out there, volunteer. If you feel that you have a chance, then run for that office.
Correct.
It's okay for people to fail, by the way, you got people that spend $1 billion and they got out of the presidential race.
Right.
And I don't think that's something bad. They gave it a shot, they tried, they had a vision, and it didn't happen. For example, Bernie Sanders, now that he's out of the race, I ask myself, should he have even got into the race?
Right.
Or is it that, he just wasted so much money, so much effort? And the answer is absolutely yes. Because if he doesn't get into office, imagine how many people he has inspired to think differently. Mm-hmm. To think that this country, America, belongs to everybody. He's going to be a president for every American, regardless of their culture, regardless of their nationality, regardless of their background. And it's very unfortunate that he's out of the race today, but I am sure that people running for office later, for local office, for members of Congress, members in the Senate, will be motivated and inspired to be taking the same footsteps that he did. And they will be successful. So I feel that it's, we have to get started locally.
Right.
We have to try to speak to as many people as we can. I was just reading a book, Michelle Obama's memoirs.
Right.
And she's talking about her life, and she's talking about this young Barack who's going around as a motivational speaker that just motivated people locally to get politically involved. And she says he would go to people's homes, just talk to them, at the front of their homes, in their backyards, sometimes just in people's basements. Mm-hmm. And churches, just giving speeches about how you should get involved and change the way you are, change your situation today. And soon enough, then he started running for office, and then Senate, and they picked him up. They realized that this guy he's a mover. Mm-hmm. And he made his way to the White House, right. which is great, which is something amazing. And I tell you, change will not come. Change will not be achieved for this community of Muslims living in the West unless we look at the Jews. Unless we get involved. I mean, the Jewish community, you have to respect their achievement.
Yeah, they've done a great job.
I mean, they are a minority, and look at how powerful they are today. Yes, we we see that sometimes with the power that they have, they do things we don't agree with, and obviously we're not shy to say that.
Right.
However, it is, they're not going to get to their achievements and then call me up and say, Jawad, what do you think we should do now since, we want to be fair?
Correct.
That's not going to happen. Similarly, I think if we get to that level, we're going to look after our interests. Not on the expense of others, but, look after your community's interest.
Correct.
And look what they have achieved. Look at, the evangelicals in the United States. I urge the brothers and sisters to read a book called The Family.
Okay.
That talks about the life of this man who passed away in 2009, I think, Doug Coe. He was people thought he was the most powerful man in the world.
Wow.
And some people thought he was the most powerful man in the United States because presidents come and go, but so this was a saying in DC, presidents come and go, but there always will be Doug Coe.
Right.
He's always going to be there. And he was an evangelical leader who got so politically involved, influenced so many politicians. Look at the African Americans. They went from slavery to the White House.
Yes.
And we really have to be inspired by all those stories, knowing that change will only come if we sit behind the steering wheel. If we decide that we're going to make that change. And we cannot make that change if you're not reading about politics, if you're not reading, look at the list of the bestsellers, and the ones that are discussing politics. Are you reading them? Are you reading those magazines? Are you reading those articles? Are you even meeting regularly, maybe 3 times, 4 times a year with some elected officials? Are you hearing what's going on? Are you reading, the works of think tanks that are shaping the future of America? Are you even donating? And fortunately, we have some think tanks in Washington. We have some, I would say, activists who are lobbying on behalf of the Muslim community.
Is that Muslim think tanks? Or?
Yeah, we do, but they're not very active.
Right.
But we need many more. We need hundreds, if not thousands, of think tanks and lobbyist groups in Washington D.C. lobbying on behalf of this minority. You said that Pew says there are 3.5 million Muslims, but I believe the number is much bigger than that.
Yeah.
I have seen numbers from CARE. I have seen numbers from other people who are suggesting 5 million, 6 million, some even 7 million.
Yeah.
But the least is 3.5 million.
Correct.
And that's a huge number. 3.5 million is bigger than the Muslim population of Lebanon.
Right.
All country.
Yes.
It's much bigger than the Muslim population of the UAE, Qatar. You have more Muslims in America than you have in Qatar. You have more Muslims in America than you have in the UAE.
Right.
So we really have to think about that, and look at how much money they spend on their political campaigns. I know that, for example, in a country like Kuwait, there's so much money that's being spent on political campaigns.
Right.
For the different sects and groups and political systems to get in office. But yet we're not doing that in America. So that's something that really we need to change.
Yeah, that just brings up a point in my mind is I always feel like it's hard for me to reach people and tell them the importance about civic engagement and voting. But I think that the legitimate places that can basically get people involved would be our community centers, our masajid, our imam bargas, places like that. So what do you think we could do to organize ourselves politically within our community centers and not just us as individuals? Me, myself, I might not have as much legitimacy or influence as my masjid or my local community center.
Yeah, I know that, I know that a lot of Muslims have taken this initiative. I don't want to mention names now because I feel like it would be unfair.
Right.
I would be skipping a lot of people. But I know members who, for example, they have created the Muslim Democratic Party or the Muslim Republican Party or, things like that. And they have basically gotten the Muslim community involved. However, I think our mosques, should be just like the mosque of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Rasulullah, when he made his masjid, he made it a headquarters for the Muslims. It wasn't just a place to pray. In fact, every person, I'm sure, watching now has heard of the hadith where Rasulullah got into the mosque. He saw a group of people praying, another group discussing knowledge. He joined the group that discusses knowledge. And for the longest period of time, the inheritors of the knowledge of Rasulullah were teaching his knowledge from the minbar of Rasulullah. Similarly, Imam Ali, he was standing on the minbar and saying, "Saluni qabla an tafquduni." Ask me before I depart from you, meaning increase in your knowledge. It was a place of knowledge. Imam al-Sadiq turned the mosque of Rasulullah into a university. Today, knowledge is not, limited to just science, religious discussions. Today, political science is a subject by itself, is a science by itself that needs to be discussed. I think our mosques must open their doors to physicians, to surgeons, to politicians, to professors, to authors, to members of Congress, to all sorts of individuals, all sorts of professions, to come and just discuss the very basics of their profession.
Right.
And how their profession can earn them a good living, because that's what people care about, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, everybody talks about this, selflessness, sacrifice, altruistic lifestyle, but that's all in the books. That's a vision everybody has. But when it comes to my children, my family, I'm not willing to sacrifice, regardless.
Right.
Bring people to talk about it. Talk about how this can affect the future of the Muslim community in America. Get people to get involved in that particular field by the leadership of this person. So you can basically have committees in the mosques that serve as advisors to people who are seeking to plan their future.
Right.
Plan their careers, especially in the field of media, journalism, and political involvement. We need to do seminars like that, all year long in our local mosques and community centers. But I tell you, with this pandemic going on and people being stuck at home, mosques will now turn, and your mosque will be your iPad,
right,
and your iPhone, and that's our job now. We need to basically, I think the live shut down. Unfortunately, I think we have some technical difficulties. Oh, now we're back. I think we're back.
Yeah, we're fine.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. We just had a little technical difficulty for a few seconds. We actually, at my local mosque, we ran voter registration campaigns, and we were actually picked by our county as a nonpartisan voting center. So Republicans and Democrats alike were able to come to our mosque and actually vote. This encouraged our community members to go and vote, because their voting center would potentially be their mosque. So they wouldn't feel uncomfortable, and they would already know where to go, and they all were able to register at the masjid during Friday prayers, after Friday prayers. So our success story, we got a Muslim elected assemblyman this year, actually. So it was a moment of victory for us. We felt that locally we can make our voice heard just by running voter registration campaigns. A lot more community members were able to get out and vote, especially the older community. Our elders, although they're citizens and they have the right to vote, a lot of them don't practice that, and they don't take advantage of that. So alhamdulillah, it paid off in the end. And I think, just like you said, seminars and voter registration campaigns, and one big thing I'd like to emphasize too is the census. So when we fill out the census, it gives the government an updated number of how many Muslims there really are in the United States. And unfortunately, there isn't maybe a option for Middle Eastern people to fill out on race, but you could write other and specify your race.
Specify. Don't say you're Italian or Hispanic.
Or white. You know, most Middle Eastern brothers are
who are brown
are
will end up putting white.
Right. Yeah. So, but that's something to think about. So, what do you think about donating to Muslim representative officials, elected officials? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a very important point that I have to talk about. And thank you for bringing it up.
Right.
Look, it will not happen. It will never happen unless people are digging deep in their pockets. Unless people feel the urgency of donating to this cause. Those officials that are in office today, it was not possible for them to get where they are unless there was money involved.
Right.
And that's something that we have to really consider. Part of your charity, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of your charity, let's say you're donating $2,000 a year in charity, then make sure that there is a percentage of it, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of it, that's going to political involvement. Whether it's to a Muslim official running for office or a Muslim friendly person. I can tell you, I have met members of Congress. Like I said, I cannot bring their name. I don't want to make this sound like a political campaign for some people.
Right.
But believe me, they are really good people. They are genuine people. Some of them are my friends. I know that they are very good human beings. And they are very good to Muslims. Once you can just look them up. I mean, those people are known they stand up for the rights of whoever is being subject to harassment, discrimination, and whoever is being mistreated. They will stand up, they will speak out, they will get their voice heard. It's unfair that we as a Muslim community enjoy them defending us and our rights, and they become our spokesmen in the Senate and in the Congress, but we don't support them. And for the longest time, I want to say this to our younger viewers, to my younger brothers and sisters.
Right.
That, look, calm down. People who are younger, they're full of energy, they're excited. And when you talk about political involvement, when you talk about having to endorse people that are running for office, that are friendly with the Muslims, they will call you a traitor, they will call you names, they will do all sorts of tricks. I remember, this being a very, very intense issue when I was young, when I was growing up, whoever basically told people to go out there and vote and be politically involved, and he was called a traitor. He was, people were writing articles about, I remember several years ago I was in Houston and I gave a talk about being politically involved, and the same day there was an article that one of the sisters wrote, may Allah forgive us all, and she basically wrote all those things that, JawadQazwini is a CIA agent, he's getting $100,000 from the CIA every year, as if they were facts.
Right.
And I understand her frustration with what I said, but don't go to such limits of you putting yourself in the dunya and in the akhirah and making a fool out of yourself by accusing people. I remember it was the month of Ramadan, and I just said, you know what, I said to myself, I will leave her to Allah. I will let Allah decide, inshallah, to guide her, and she realizes that she's done something very bad. So young people, whether you're 15, 16, 20 years old, there is a brother who may Allah forgive him and forgive us all. That's very enthusiastic about basically going after me and how I spoke about Bernie Sanders and how people should vote for him and me hoping that he makes it into office. Well, if you disagree with me, we don't. This does not have to be, the end of the world.
Right.
We are talking about changing the fate and the future of Muslims in America, and that's the only way is by being politically involved.
Right.
So, when I talk about those topics, other people are shy. They don't want to talk about it, or other people are intimidated. If I tell people to vote, if I tell people to get politically involved, what's going to happen next is they're going to call me all those names. That's fine, brother. That's fine, my sister. People accuse Rasulullah of being a magician, of being a liar, of being all sorts of things. That did not stop Rasulullah from doing what he needed to do for his community.
Right.
Therefore, do not let such people, such discussions, discourage you. If there is somebody who is fair, who is adil, who is just, running for an office, and there aren't Muslims doing that, support those people financially. And if it's a Muslim, then that's beautiful. Support that person financially. Don't say, well, this person is not from my school of thought. This person is not, religious enough. This person is that. Let's leave all those pathetic side discussions aside and let's think of a better future for our community.
Yeah. And I know, just to bring up a small point, some people may not have that much money or economic means to donate, but there's plenty of ways to donate, if you're a web developer and, for example, you might not have that much money at your disposal, you could possibly create a website to bring awareness to Muslim civic engagement. Or if you're just a young student, you can become an intern for a Muslim elected official. So donating doesn't necessarily have to be just money, right? It could be using our services and our skills. Because, the early Muslims in Medina, the Prophet specifically selected each one to a certain task based on their skill set. And they were able to flourish into an empire, right? Just to talk about the next point, what is your view, or what do you think the version of the Muslim American dream should be?
You see, coming back to your point, if you read the biography of the most powerful leaders in America, they were once interns.
Correct.
Really, they were once. Some of them were cleaning bathrooms.
Right.
When they first arrived to Washington D.C. for very powerful people, and that's how they actually got their way into becoming presidents and very powerful members of Congress and the Senate and the judiciary system. So don't underestimate, a summer being spent as an intern in Washington, D.C. If you're a parent and you can make that happen for your child, please do so. That can affect his future and the future of all the Muslims. Now, if you can't do that, look, you can't travel, you have a special circumstance, then become locally involved. And if you have, a lifestyle where you cannot really get out there, that's not something you enjoy, then yes, you can design flyers, you can make websites. Today, time is worth money.
Right.
So instead of giving you $1,000, spend the equivalent of $1,000 volunteering.
Right.
Don't say, well, I see that a lot of people are really lazy. With when you send them a petition, really, they're not willing to take 10 seconds to sign that petition, and it's unfair. It's very unfair. This voice that you have today, this ability that you have today, has a zakat.
Right.
You have to be charitable with it, and one way for you to be charitable with it is to share that. Just like you give zakat from the money, extra money that you have, you need to share it with other people. There is zakat on knowledge, where you have to share it. There is zakat on many things. Amongst that is the freedom that you have, the voice that you have. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask us about all of that in the Day of Judgment. And I think people should, once they see petitions, they should immediately act. Once they see something that's going to help them and help the communities and help other people, they should act. Even if, they don't find an immediate urge for it, if they don't find that it will immediately affect their lives, because I will only do things when I feel like it will immediately have an impact on me. If it doesn't have an immediate impact on me, then I just skip it. And I think that's, the type of mindset that we need to install in our community.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sayyid, for your insight today. I'd like to take this time to thank every one of our viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your support. We're going to be doing this every other night of Ramadan at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, and midnight London time. We'd appreciate it if you leave your comments on the flyers ahead of time. So every night before we do our live stream, we're going to be dropping a new topic and a flyer. And we appreciate it if you leave your comments and questions on that post. So please share this with everyone you know and give us your feedback. Let us know if we missed anything. And now we'll be taking some questions and have a general discussion.
Yes, brothers and sisters, I would like to just emphasize that please go ahead and leave your questions, comments, and concerns underneath every flyer that's going to be published. That way we can prepare to incorporate the most important of those discussions in our talk. And we then won't have to scroll down this, the comment section to find the most suitable question or comment to discuss. I also would like to thank you, Sayyid Hamdulillah, for hosting this event and thanking the brothers and sisters for tuning in. I know today's probably the first day and people are shopping around for different places to look for lectures and podcasts. I think this will be saved. And it turned into a podcast. So, just like we have the podcast for the Quran podcast, the Sunday brunch, and contemporary Islamic law, this inshallah at the end of the month of Ramadan will turn into a podcast and people can look at it. We will also put it on YouTube as well.
Okay.
And it will be saved here so people can actually
Rewatch
it whenever they want. Obviously we didn't get to cover everything. There's a lot more to be covered, but I think it's definitely a good beginning. I personally feel really thirsty.
Yeah.
So I think it would be great if we can probably end here. I think people are going to get used to this kind of discussion, so they'll have their questions ready beforehand.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that people will actually start leaving their comments in the comment section, their questions in the comment section. So we also had some little bit of technical difficulties with the internet. I felt like it was cutting on and off. So we'll try to fix everything, and inshallah we will meet not tomorrow but the day after.
Inshallah.
Thank you, brothers and sisters. May Allah bless you. Wassalamu alaikum.